People often think success cures loneliness. That once you've got a few zeros in your bank account, a luxury penthouse overlooking the skyline, and a name whispered in elite circles, you'll never feel empty again. They're wrong. My name is Damien Wolfe, 34, founder of Wolfe Dynamics, listed in Forbes 40 Under 40 for 3 years straight, and the proud owner of more wealth than I know what to do with. And yet, that morning, I stood alone by the window of my glass-walled office, staring out at the Manhattan skyline, an untouched espresso cooling on the desk behind me, and a crumpled invitation in my hand. Ridgewood High. 15-year class reunion, embossed in gold, sealed in nostalgia. I should have thrown it away. I'd spent most of high school invisible, or worse, the punchline of every inside joke. Tall, lanky, quiet. The kid with thrift store shoes and hand-me-down books. The one who got shoved into lockers and laughed at in gym class. My family couldn't afford to send me to prom, let alone let me dream of fitting in. And now they wanted me back. As if we all belonged in the same room, a knock on the door pulled me out of my spiral. "Come in," I said, not turning. The door opened gently. Only one person in my life moved with that much caution and grace. Ella Harper, my assistant for nearly 4 years. She was punctual, professional, and far too kind for someone who worked in a world this cutthroat. She also had the rare gift of making silence feel comfortable. "Your flight to Zurich's been confirmed," she said, setting down the itinerary. "Boardroom briefing at 10 and—" She paused. "You've been holding that envelope for 23 minutes. I glanced at her reflection in the glass. She stood just behind me, sunlight catching the soft waves of her chestnut brown hair, her slate blue eyes curious. "It's a mistake," I said. "The itinerary?" "No," I said, holding up the gold invitation. "This." Her eyebrows lifted, slightly. "Ridgewood High?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah, some reunion thing." She walked over and gently took the card from my fingers. "Are you going?" "Why would I?" "I don't know." "Closure? Vindication?" she said, smirking a little. "You could pull up in the Aston Martin, make them eat their words." "That sounds petty." "It is. But sometimes a little petty is good for the soul," she said, folding the card and placing it on my desk like a challenge. "Besides, you've worked every holiday this year. Might be nice to get away for something." "Personnel." I stared at her for a moment. Ella was sharp. She always knew how to read me without prying. But it was the way she said personal that struck me. Like she knew there was a version of Damien Wolfe that still wanted to feel normal. I wouldn't. "Want to show up alone?" I said offhandedly, instantly regretting the vulnerability. She blinked. "Then don't." I looked at her. "You volunteering?" Her lips parted slightly, surprised, but she didn't pull away. "If you want me to, I could come." There was a beat of silence. "Strictly as an assistant, of course," she added, quickly. "I'll make sure everything's arranged. Handle logistics. Keep the wolves away." I smirked at the irony. "That sounds more like babysitting," she shrugged. "Call it executive protection." I found myself smiling, really smiling for the first time in weeks. Maybe going back wasn't such a bad idea after all. 3 days later, we touched down in North Carolina. I had flown us in my private jet, but Ella handled everything like it was business as usual. Organizing transport, coordinating the hotel suite, even vetting the guest list for any potential emotional landmines, as she called them. She was thoughtful like that. We arrived at the venue, an old restored vineyard now turned event space. The nostalgia hit me like a truck. Twinkling lights hung across the courtyard. A jazz band warmed up in the background. Former classmates were already mingling by the bar. "Ready?" Ella asked beside me as we sat in the car. I stared out at the laughing silhouettes, the men in fitted suits, the women draped in elegance and confidence. "Not even a little," I said truthfully. Ella reached out, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "You're not the kid they remember, Damien." I met her eyes. "No, but they'll always remember me as him." She gave me a soft smile, then let them be shocked. With that, I stepped out. Flashbulbs might as well have gone off because the moment I walked in, the entire energy shifted. Heads turned, whispers erupted, and I wasn't alone. Ella walked beside me, dressed in a white satin dress that was simple, modest, and yet impossibly graceful. She didn't try to steal attention, but somehow she radiated a kind of quiet power that made people notice. Someone actually dropped a glass. "Is that Damien Wolfe?" "No way, that's not..." He was like, poor. "Who's she? His date?" I heard it all. But I didn't flinch. I had prepared for this. What I hadn't prepared for was seeing them again. A group of suited men and women broke away from the bar. The old crew. The ones who'd made life a quiet hell for me back then. Blake Thompson, still smug. Jessica Miles, who once told me I'd peak by 20. And Parker, the ringleader. Parker stepped forward, beer in hand, flashing a smile that had once ruled the halls like a crown. "Wolf," he boomed, like we were old war buddies. "Look at you, man. You clean up nice." "Yeah," I said calmly. "Shocking. What a few billion can do." He laughed, clearly thrown off by my directness. "And who's this vision?" he asked, eyeing Ella a little too long. I stepped in slightly. "This is Ella, my assistant." I saw his smirk return. "Assistant? Huh?" I knew what he was thinking. The implication was loud. I'd brought a beautiful woman to show off. Typical rich guy move, right? But Ella simply extended her hand with poise. "Pleasure to meet you," she said firmly. Parker took it clearly, not used to being looked in the eye like that. As we moved past them, Ella leaned closer and whispered, "Want me to start compiling clapbacks?" I chuckled. Not yet. The night went on with mingling, laughter, and endless small talk. But the whispers never really stopped. I saw the looks. I saw the confusion. And beneath it all, I saw the same toxic hierarchy still lingering in their glances. Except this time I wasn't playing by their rules. But as the evening went on, one thing became very clear. They hadn't changed, but I had. And the only person who truly understood that was standing beside me in heels and elegance, holding my world together with her calm. Ella. I looked at her in the golden light of the chandelier as she laughed softly at something I said. And for a moment, something stirred in me I hadn't let myself feel in years. Warmth. Real warmth. Not admiration, not attraction, affection. I didn't know what this reunion was about anymore. Revenge, closure, or maybe a reminder that sometimes the best thing you can bring back from your past is someone who believes in your future. I've negotiated billion-dollar mergers, outwitted legal teams trained to destroy reputations, and once faced a hostile board vote that nearly cost me my company. But standing in that ballroom, surrounded by people who used to laugh at my cheap sneakers, I felt a pressure that no corporate war had ever given me. Judgment wasn't being handed out by lawyers here. It came in smirks, sideways glances, and whispers that crawled like insects through the crowd. I felt Ella's hand brush, my arm lightly grounding me again. "They're trying to test you," she whispered. I didn't answer, but I didn't have to. She knew me well enough to read my silence. We wandered toward the photo wall, where framed pictures from our high school days were displayed. My heart clenched when I saw one in particular, senior class picture, 20 rows of students. And there I was, in the far back corner, half shadowed, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and a smile 2 sizes too small. "That you?" Ella asked softly, pointing. I nodded. Didn't even know they used that photo. You look like someone who didn't know anyone would ever look at him twice." She didn't say it with pity. She said it like she saw the whole story behind. That kid," I said, my voice low, "used to fake being sick on presentation days so he wouldn't have to talk in front of a class." Ella glanced at me with a half smile. "Well, I saw you deliver a speech in Tokyo last month that made 1,000 executives cry and sign $1,000,000 checks." I chuckled, then sobered. What if they never see me as that guy? She looked up at me and said something that stopped my breath. "Then they're the ones still stuck in high school, Damien." Before I could reply, I heard his voice again. "Yo, Wolf," Parker called from the bar. "Come tell us about your private jets, man. Or are you too busy babysitting your secretary?" The group around him laughed, not cruelly, just carelessly, which was somehow worse. Ella's eyes met mine, calm but alert. Permission to ruin them? I turned fully toward her. "Be my guest." She set her drink down and walked toward them. I followed at a distance, heart pounding for a whole new reason. "Secretary," Ella said, stopping just short of their circle. "That's rich." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you?" Ella smiled. Not the flustered kind, but the kind that said you've already lost and don't know it yet. "No." "I'm Mr. Wolfe's chief operating officer," she said. "I manage over 1,200 employees across 6 continents. I also speak 4 languages and helped negotiate his last acquisition of a European conglomerate." The room stilled. She kept going. "I graduated summa cum laude from Columbia, was recruited by Bain & Compers, and left because I wanted to build something real. Not just pitch decks for brands that would never exist." Someone actually choked on their drink. Parker blinked. "Oh, wow." Ella tilted her head, voice still gentle. "But I do understand the confusion. In your world, women like me probably aren't allowed to be more than pretty. In mine, we run empires." Dead silence. And then, "Damn," someone whispered from behind the bar. Parker stammered, trying to recover. "Hey, no offense, all right? We just didn't know." "You still don't," Ella said, and turned to walk away. The crowd parted, for her like royalty. She didn't storm off. She glided. And me? I followed. Back near the courtyard, away from the noise, I found her standing by the stone fountain, lit by soft fairy lights, wrapped around a nearby tree. "That was," I began. "Too much?" she asked. "No," I said. "It was perfect." She exhaled slowly. "I don't usually talk like that. I don't usually bring my COO to high school reunions." Ella laughed. "Touché." We stood in silence for a beat. "Do you ever wish it all made more sense?" I asked. "Why some people are born in houses with swimming pools and others grow up rationing electricity?" She turned toward me. "I don't think it's supposed to make sense, but I do think we're meant to do something with what we're given or what we fight for." I stared at her, the night air cooling against my skin. "You believe that?" "I have to," she said simply. And I realized something. She didn't just come here to support me. She came because she understood exactly what it meant to be underestimated, and what it meant to rise anyway. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People were different now. After Ella's graceful evisceration of Parker, the tone changed. Some classmates approached with more sincerity, curiosity even. I gave polite answers, but my attention always drifted back to the woman beside me. As we sat through a slideshow of then and now photos, I leaned in and whispered, "Why did you really come tonight?" She glanced at me, surprised. "You didn't have to," I said. "You've never asked me for anything personal. And this reunion? It's not exactly your scene." Ella hesitated, then said, "Because I've worked beside you for 4 years, Damien. I've seen the man behind the empire, the one who writes checks for his janitor's grandchild's surgery and never tells anyone. The one who eats lunch in silence because no one ever invites him to sit. She met my eyes. And I didn't want you walking into that ballroom alone, thinking no one sees the real you. That stopped me cold, because no one had ever said that to me. Not once. Ella. I began, but the moment was cut off by the host, calling for everyone to gather outside. The final event of the evening, a class photo recreation, taken under the old oak tree on the school's back lawn. We were ushered out by the dozens, lining up in the exact pose we had stood in 15 years ago. I moved toward the back row instinctively, until I felt a hand tug gently on mine. Ella. No, she said, guiding me forward. What? This time, she whispered, you stand in the center. I didn't argue. And as the camera clicked, with me in a charcoal suit and Ella in white beside me, I realized something extraordinary. I wasn't here for revenge. I wasn't even here for closure. I was here to rewrite my story, and somehow the woman I'd once thought of only as my assistant was starting to write herself into it. They say time heals all wounds, but they never tell you what to do when those wounds reopen, without warning, with one name, one glance, one smell of old gym floor polish that takes you back to the worst day of your life. I thought I was past all that. Thought the empire I built had buried those memories under gold-lined boardrooms and Forbes covers. But trauma doesn't check bank balances before it pays a visit. And tonight, it came back wearing red lipstick and an amused smirk. Her name was Tessa LeClaire, high school's reigning queen, the first girl I ever loved, the first person to publicly humiliate me, and there she was, walking toward Ella and me like no time had passed. Well, well, she said, champagne glass in hand. If it isn't Damien Wolfe, you clean up nice. Ella subtly slid her hand, closer to mine. Protective, maybe, or territorial. Tessa, I said calmly. Didn't think you'd show, she laughed. Please, I'm a realtor in Beverly Hills now. Can't pass up a chance to network, especially with someone like you. Her eyes flicked to Ella. And this is, I smiled thinly, Ella Monroe, my chief operating officer. Tessa's brows lifted. Oh wow, that's impressive. Always thought you'd end up with someone more quiet. Ella answered before I could. I tried quiet, she said sweetly. Didn't work. The world doesn't listen unless you raise your voice. Tessa blinked. Cute. I started to steer us away, but she caught my sleeve lightly. Actually, Damien, I was hoping we could talk. Alone. Ella looked at me, not possessive, just curious. I hesitated. Tessa gave that old smile again, the one that once pulled me in like a riptide. Only now, it didn't feel like water. It felt like quicksand. We stood by the old lockers, now painted over but still rattling the same way they used to. You look good, she said. So do you, I replied, polite, guarded. I heard about your company, she went on. Saw you on the cover of Fortune. I had to do a double take. Damien Wolfe, the shy kid who couldn't look people in the eye? I shrugged. People grow. She leaned closer. Some of us regret not growing with them. Ah, there it was. The hidden card. Tessa, I said quietly. What do you really want? She blinked, pretending to be confused. What do you mean? I mean, you're successful, married once, divorced, no kids, selling luxury homes. So why bring up the past now? She hesitated. Then, in a moment that stripped away all pretense, she said, because the way you looked at her, that's how you used to look at me. I went still. And something inside me, something that once curled and burned in her presence, finally exhaled. Tessa, I said softly, what we had was a lesson, not a story. Her eyes flickered. So, that's it? I hope you find what you're really looking for, I said. But I already have. And I walked away, back toward the only person in the room who had ever seen me whole. Ella was by the garden again, alone, lit by the golden glow of the old lantern strung between trees. She turned when she heard me. "Tessa?" she asked. I nodded. She wanted to talk? She wanted the past back, I said. But I've moved on. Ella tilted her head. "And you? Are you okay?" I studied her face. "You know what's funny? I always thought getting rich would erase all the pain. That success would silence the voices of people who said I'd never be enough." "And did it?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but you did." Her breath caught just slightly. "Not because you praised me, but because you saw me, and never once asked me to be anyone else." Silence stretched between us, the kind of silence that only comes before something sacred. Later that night, when the class reunion began to wind down, the DJ played the final slow song. Bittersweet Symphony. Ironic, maybe, but fitting. Couples moved to the floor. I hesitated, then offered my hand. "Dance with me?" Ella smiled. "Are you sure? You hate dancing?" I hated high school too, but look how that turned out. She laughed and took my hand. We moved slowly, awkwardly at first, until I realized I didn't care how we looked. I cared how I felt. And in that moment, I felt found. After the dance, we lingered by my car in the quiet lot, unsure if the night was really over. "Ella," I said, voice low, "why did you never leave? You're overqualified. You've been offered jobs that would pay twice as much." She looked at me with those impossibly steady eyes. "Because I wasn't looking for money, Damien. I was looking for purpose, and I found it building something with you." Then she stepped a little closer. "And maybe," she added, "because you're the first person who ever asked me to stay without expecting anything more." I swallowed hard. Maybe it's time I did. That made her look up sharply. "What do you mean?" I exhaled. "I mean, stay. But not just as KOO. My voice cracked a little. Stay as the person I call first in the morning. The person I sit beside at weddings. The person I come home to." Ella's lips parted. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. "What is it?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. An emergency alert. Company breach. Global database flagged. Immediate login required. The color drained from my face. Our reunion was over. Because the past wasn't the only thing waiting to challenge us. The future was too. The drive back from the reunion was silent, but not in a heavy way. It was the silence of two minds racing in perfect synchrony. Ella sat beside me, eyes fixed on her phone screen, thumbs moving like lightning. I had one hand on the wheel, the other on the voice command button, issuing directives to our IT team as we headed back to the penthouse. Secure the London server mirror. Purge non-essential system ports. Tell Anton to disable all third-party plugins, especially the ones we flagged last quarter. My voice was clipped, every word carrying weight. Because this wasn't just a minor security hiccup. It was a full-blown cyber attack on a system we'd spent 10 years building. And if whoever was behind this got through, they'd have access to every deal, every algorithm, every secret the Wolfe Group had ever touched. As we rode the elevator up to the 51st floor, Ella turned to me. "This is targeted." "I know." She nodded. "It's not ransom. It's not money. They're not touching any transaction threads. They're here for intel," I said. "They want strategy files and model simulations." Ella's brow furrowed. "That means someone wants to copy us." And that narrowed the suspects drastically. There were only 3 companies that could even dream of matching our architecture. One of them was run by an ex-partner who still hadn't forgiven me for going solo. I pulled up our internal dashboard on the massive office screen as soon as we got in. Red alerts glowed like angry stars across the map. Then, a direct message popped up on our encrypted channel. This is just the beginning. You should have stayed the nerd at the back of the class. Ella froze. I stared at the screen. And for the first time in years, I felt rage. Not fear, not panic. Pure, focused rage. This is personal, I said. Ella nodded. They know who you are, and they know when to hit. Class reunion, limited Wi-Fi, fewer eyes on the network, I muttered. They waited for the perfect moment. She pulled up the access logs and paused. There's a unique fingerprint here. I came over to look. A digital tag embedded deep inside the infiltration code. Not just any tag. It was a line of code I had personally written during my college years. Only one person ever had access to that build. Jonas. Ella's voice was cold. Jonas Kincaid? I nodded. The guy who used to copy off my computer science homework. The guy I co-founded my first startup with. The same one who sold our project to the highest bidder behind my back and walked away with everything. We hadn't spoken in almost 12 years. Until tonight. I'll take care of it, I said. Ella looked up. No, we will. I met her. Eyes. She didn't blink. I'm not letting you fight this alone, Damien, she said. You built this company with your heart. I built it with my time. If someone thinks they can come in and burn it down, they're going to have to go through. Both of us. I exhaled slowly, and in that moment I realized something. We weren't just boss and assistant anymore. We were co-guardians of a dream, and maybe more. The next 48 hours were a storm. We converted my penthouse into a command center. Screens on every surface, cables like vines across the floor. Coffee flowed. Sleep didn't. Ella worked like someone possessed, coordinating the international teams, rerouting core firewalls, organizing NDA-level cleanup squads. Meanwhile, I traced Jonas's moves. He was using a proxy server routed through Singapore, but there were glitches in the bounce, just small enough to catch. We followed them like breadcrumbs, until I found him, sitting on a stage in Silicon Valley, giving a TEDx talk about digital ethics and responsible AI. The audacity. I sent the footage to Ella. She raised an eyebrow. He's good. I cracked a bitter smile. He's always been good at pretending to be clean while playing dirty. So what now? She asked. Call him out? No, we bait him. She looked intrigued. We send a counter signal, encrypted, but juicy, something too tempting for him not to try and download. An algorithm we accidentally leave unlocked. Trapdoor protocol, she said, catching on. Smart. I nodded. And once he tries to bite, we trace him, fully. IP, location, associates. We catch him with his hand in the vault. And then, I looked at her. Then I decide if I want to destroy him or forgive him. That night around 3 a.m., I collapsed on the couch, exhausted. Ella was curled up on the floor, blanket around her shoulders, still typing. Ella, I said quietly. Yeah? Thank you. She looked up, her eyes tired but shining. For what? For staying. For fighting, for believing. She smiled faintly. Always. I looked at her for a long time. And then, without thinking, I said what I had wanted to say since the reunion. You know that invitation to the reunion. It wasn't just because you were my COO. She froze. I continued. I wanted them to see you. To see what kind of person I trust more than anyone. To see what loyalty, brilliance, and quiet strength actually look like. She stared at me. You didn't need to impress them, I said. I needed to remind myself that I'm not that kid anymore, and I'm not alone. Silence. Then Ella got up, walked over, sat beside me. and whispered, "You were never alone. You just hadn't looked beside you yet." The next morning, Jonas took the bait. He logged in from an underground co-working hub in Berlin, thinking he was cloaked. We traced the ping in under 30 seconds. Ella was the one who cracked the full server ID. By 9:00 a.m. we had everything. Code history, file access, stolen patents, even emails he'd sent pretending to be our staff. I stared at the evidence. I could end him, blacklist him from the industry, ruin him financially, expose him in the very halls he had once kicked me out of. But instead, I closed the file. Ella raised an eyebrow. "You're not pressing charges?" "I might, but not today." "Why not?" "Because the world already knows who he is," I said. "And now, so do I." She nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, the weight of my past lifted. Later that afternoon, as we walked along the quiet edge of the city marina to clear our heads, Ella stopped suddenly. "What?" I asked. She turned to me. "You've spent years building walls, Damien, around your business, around your heart." "Yeah," I admitted, "but the only reason those walls didn't crack is because you let me in." I looked at her, really looked, and realized something terrifying. I had fallen for her, not just the way you admire a partner, but the way you crave a person's laughter in the silence, the way you memorize their footsteps, their habits, the way they sip tea or scold hackers or wear their hair when they're too busy to care. "Ella," I said. She turned. But just as I opened my mouth, my phone buzzed again. Another alert. But this time, it wasn't a breach. It was an invitation to an exclusive tech roundtable at which Jonas had just been removed, and I had been asked to keynote. Ella glanced over my shoulder at the message, then met my eyes. "Well," she said, "looks like they know who the real king is now." I smiled. But deep inside, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about asking her if she wanted to build not just a company, but a life with me. The sun had barely risen when I stood at the windows of my penthouse, watching the skyline bleed gold over the glass towers. Below, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm: cars, horns, ambition. But inside me, stillness, because something had changed. No, someone, Ella. She padded into the room barefoot, clutching her laptop and a steaming cup of green tea. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I didn't want to," I replied, watching her reflection in the window. "I was afraid I'd miss something." She smirked, setting the tea down. "You mean like the sunrise, or your billion-dollar empire crumbling while you dream?" I turned toward her and smiled. "No. I was afraid I'd miss you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't deflect or laugh. She just looked at me and said, "Then let's stop missing things, Damien." After the cyber attack had been repelled and Jonas Kincaid exposed, the Wolfe Group was bigger than ever. The story of how we turned the trap on our attacker made headlines. Our stock surged. Emails flooded in, investors, media, even government departments asking for advice on cybersecurity. But all the accolades felt muted, because what mattered more than the praise was the partnership that built it all. Ella had proven what I already knew deep down. She wasn't just my assistant, or my COO. She was the soul of this company, and maybe the missing piece of my life. I took her to my private estate that weekend, a place I hadn't been in years. A quiet house on a lake, surrounded by pines and mountains, far away from the clamor of the city. As we walked the property, she ran her fingers along the worn wooden railing of the dock. "You built this?" she asked. I nodded. Back when no one believed I'd ever make enough money to buy a used car, let alone a tech company. "It's beautiful." I watched her carefully, and then I asked the question I had been carrying for weeks. Ella, why did you take the job with me? She turned slowly. You could have worked for anyone, I continued. Your resume was incredible. You had offers from the government, the UN, top firms, and yet you accepted an offer from a socially awkward tech guy with messy hair and a reputation for being emotionally unavailable. She tilted her head. You really want the truth? I nodded. She took a breath. Because your cover letter didn't sound like a CEO. It sounded like a man who was trying to build something that mattered. You didn't care about quarterly projections or buzzwords. You cared about impact, about doing things the right way, and because something in your voice made me feel like I'd finally found the place where I could grow. I was quiet for a long time. And then I said, you didn't just grow, Ella. You made this place bloom. That night, we sat by the fireplace, the lake shimmering under the moon. I poured her a glass of wine. She took one sip and grimaced. I still hate red, she whispered. I laughed. You pretended to like it for 3 years. I was trying to be professional. I smiled. You've always been more than professional, Ella. She didn't answer, so I stood up, walked over to the old grand piano tucked in the corner, and opened the lid. You play? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Only when I'm terrified, I said. Her eyes twinkled. Then play something. What are you scared of? I looked straight at her. You. She froze. Because you make me want to be a man who deserves someone like you. I played the opening chords of the only song I knew by heart. A slow, haunting tune my mother used to hum when I was a boy. Before she got sick. Before I had to drop out of college the first time to care for her. Ella didn't say a word. She sat beside me on the bench, watching my hands, and when the song ended, she placed hers over mine. You already are that man, she whispered. And just like that, all the walls I had built, one headline, one betrayal, one lonely night, at a time, began to crumble. The next day, she cooked breakfast. Not a catered spread, not something from a 5-star chef, but actual eggs, burnt toast, and the most glorious undercooked pancakes I'd ever tasted. I'm a genius in spreadsheets, she said, holding up a spatula like a sword. Kitchen? Not so much. I laughed. For the first time in a long, unguarded way. It was domestic, simple, real. And I realized, somewhere between her tossing burnt toast at me and pretending to fire me as CEO, that I didn't just want her in the company. I wanted her in my life, all of it. That afternoon, I took her hiking up the ridge behind the lake. We stood at the top, wind in our hair, clouds brushing the peaks. I never thought I'd have this, I said quietly. Have what? Peace, joy, someone who sees the man behind the mask. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just took my hand, and that meant more than any vow. When we got back to the city on Monday, the office had changed. People stood straighter. They whispered less. Not because they feared us, but because they respected us. We weren't just CEO and assistant. We were a team, a force. The kind of duo that made others dream of building something just as meaningful. But Ella? She still brought me coffee with a sarcastic note on the lid, still rolled her eyes when I forgot lunch, still gave me hell for sending 3 a.m. emails, and I loved every second of it. That Friday, as we walked out of the office, my phone buzzed. Message from the same classmate who had laughed at the reunion. Hey Damien, we're doing a charity fundraiser for tech scholarships. Would you be willing to speak? I showed it to Ella. She smiled. Look who suddenly remembers your name. I shrugged. Should I go? She tilted her head. Only if you bring your assistant. I looked at her. She laughed. And this time, wear the good suit. We didn't announce anything publicly. Not yet. But everyone at Wolfe Group started noticing the shift. The quiet smiles, the synchronized meetings, the way our offices were always just slightly closer than before. We were more efficient, more daring, more Us. And every night when I got home and found her already curled up on the couch with blueprints in one hand and hot tea in the other, I thanked the stars for the day I sent her that offer letter, and for the fact that she said yes. They say the best love stories aren't the ones written with grand gestures and perfect timing. They're the quiet ones. The ones that grow between morning coffees, late-night emails, inside jokes, and shared dreams. Ella and I were writing that kind of story, and I didn't want it to end. A month after the class reunion, I stood in front of the same mirror I had avoided for years, not out of vanity, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't see the lonely boy who had been bullied, underestimated, or dismissed. I saw a man who had found his equal. That morning, Ella and I were set to launch something we had quietly built together for months, the Wolfe Fellowship, a full-ride scholarship program for underprivileged youth in tech and engineering, named after my late mother, the woman who raised me with nothing but love and books and faith that one day her son would matter. Ella had come up with the name. "You're not just changing lives," she'd said. "You're giving them what you never had. A door that opens." And just like that, I knew. The launch was held at the new Wolfe Tech campus, our largest facility yet. Investors, government officials, students, and press poured in. I stood at the podium, the words in front of me, but my eyes on her. She stood at the back, not in a designer gown, but in her signature navy pantsuit and modest white blouse, confident, poised, and glowing in a way that outshone every spotlight. I cleared my throat. Some of you know me as Damien Wolfe, the tech guy, the introvert, the founder. But before all that, I was just a kid with hand-me-down shoes and a second-hand dream. The room grew silent. I didn't come here today to talk about business. I came to talk about the one person who changed the way I saw the world and myself. Murmurs rippled. I locked eyes with Ella. She walked into my office 3 years ago with a resume that humbled me and a quiet brilliance that scared me, not because she was intimidating, but because she saw through everything. Ella's eyes widened slightly. I didn't hire an assistant. I gained a partner, a warrior, a woman who rebuilt this company from the inside out, who stood by me when others ran, who believed in my vision, even when I didn't. People turned to look at her. She shook her head slightly, embarrassed. She won't want the credit. She never does. But she deserves more than that. She deserves the world. I paused. So today, I'd like to dedicate this fellowship to Ella Morgan. The crowd erupted. Ella looked like she might melt into the carpet. But I wasn't done. Later, that night, after the press faded and the guests left, I took her hand and led her to the rooftop garden. She stood in silence, the skyline glittering behind her. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but I wanted to." She turned to me. "Why?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her lips parted. "I thought I was cursed to walk this world alone," I said softly. "Until you walked in and reminded me what it meant to be seen, known, loved." I opened the box, a simple ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant, strong, just like her. I don't want to wait. I don't want perfect. I want real. With you. Always. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at the ring, then at me, and whispered, "Yes." We didn't throw a $1 billion wedding. No helicopters, no fireworks, just a small ceremony at the lake house. The same dock where we first admitted how we felt, a few friends, a string quartet, her mother crying happy tears. My father, who I hadn't seen in 10 years, showing up in a suit too big and a heart finely mended. I wore the good suit. She wore white, modest, graceful, radiant. When we kissed, I felt the years fall away, the boardrooms, the betrayals. The nights I questioned everything, all replaced by a single truth: I wasn't lonely anymore. We built a life that looked nothing like the one I thought I needed. Simpler, warmer, better. She still ran the company with me, but she also painted on weekends. I still wrote code when the world was asleep, but I now had someone to wake up to. We argued sometimes about the thermostat, the way I left my socks on the floor, her obsession with peppermint tea. But every fight ended the same way, with forgiveness and laughter, and whispered "I love yous" before the lights went out. A year later, we were walking hand in hand through the same campus where I once stood invisible, and a young girl, maybe 16, ran up to us with tears in her eyes. She clutched a letter. "I got it," she said breathlessly. "The Wolfe Fellowship. I got in." Ella knelt beside her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Jasmine." Ella smiled. "Jasmine, you're going to change the world." And Jasmine hugged her like she was the sun itself. As we walked away, I whispered to Ella, "You just gave her what no one gave me." She looked up at me. "So did you." I kissed her forehead, and we kept walking forward, together.